My girlfriend drained our $17,000 account to run away with her ex to the Maldives, but she got trapped for 67 days with massive debt. And when her best friend exposed her publicly, her entire life collapsed and she never saw coming what happened next. I'm 27 years old, I work in tech, and I need to tell this story because I still can't believe it happened to me. You know, like those things you see in bad movies or Reddit posts that you think are made up. But I swear every word of this is real, and it was basically the worst year of my life, followed by the best wake-up call I could have had. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I met Victoria like 3 years ago at my friend Zachary's housewarming party, I was there with a group of colleagues from work, drinking beers and trying not to look awkward because I've never been very good at those big social gatherings where you don't know almost anyone. And then this girl comes up to me with 2 glasses of wine in her hands, trips over literally nothing because the floor was completely flat, and spills red wine all over my new white shoes that I had bought like 2 weeks before. I remember it perfectly because they were Nike Air Force, 1 second that cost me like $120, and I loved them, and there they were, completely ruined with a giant purple stain. Victoria turned red, I mean red with embarrassment, and started apologizing like she had killed my dog or something, saying she was super clumsy and that she was going to pay for my shoes and that she felt terrible. And honestly, it was adorable the way she was so embarrassed she couldn't even look me in the eyes. I told her not to worry, that they were just shoes and these things happen, and she insisted on buying me a beer to make up for it, and well, that's how it all started. We stayed talking the rest of the night, and she told me she worked in marketing for a medium-sized company in the city, that she was 24 at the time, was 25, and that she also hated these types of parties, but had come because Zachary was her best friend, Megan's cousin. There was something about her that hooked me from the start. Honestly, she had this energy that was very genuine and sweet, and by the end of the night, we exchanged numbers and agreed to go out the following weekend. And the first few weeks with Victoria were, I don't know how to say it without sounding cheesy, but they were basically perfect. We'd go out to dinner, go to the movies, spend entire Sundays at my apartment watching series and cooking together, and she made me feel like I had finally found someone who understood me. You know? She would tell me about her life, about how she had grown up in a somewhat dysfunctional home where her parents got divorced when she was like 12 years old, and she also told me a lot about her ex-boyfriend, Connor. Connor was, according to Victoria, basically the worst human being who had ever existed. She told me they had been together for like 2.5 years, that he was a tattoo artist and had this bad boy vibe that at first she found attractive, but then it became a nightmare because he was super controlling, jealous to the point of insanity, and that he had cheated on her with like 3 different girls during their relationship. She told me she had broken up with him about 8 months before meeting me, and that it had been the most difficult decision of her life because he constantly manipulated her, making her believe she was the problem, that she was too dramatic or demanding. I obviously believed her every word because why wouldn't I? Victoria seemed genuinely traumatized when she talked about Connor, like her eyes would fill with tears and everything, and I felt like the hero of the movie, because I was being the good boyfriend she deserved after being with that idiot. She would tell me things like I had restored her faith in love, that she had never met someone so considerate and stable, and basically made me feel incredible all the time. We became official after like a month and a half of dating, and by the 3rd month I was completely in love with her, in a way I had never felt with anyone before. My family adored her, my friends thought she was great, and I honestly thought I had found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. After being together for like a year and a half, we started talking about long-term plans, like serious, responsible adult stuff. We wanted to travel together to Europe, do that classic backpacking trip through several countries that everyone says they're going to do, but almost nobody actually does. And we decided to open a joint savings account specifically for that purpose. It was Victoria's idea, now that I think about it. And at the time, it seemed super mature and romantic to me, like proof that we were really committed to each other. We opened the account with $5,000 initial deposit, $2,500 from each of us, and agreed that each month we would put in an additional $500 each. The plan was to save for a year and a half to have enough money for a 3-week trip that included London, Paris, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Rome. Victoria even made a super detailed itinerary, in an Excel spreadsheet, and with approximate costs for flights, hostels, food, and activities, and I remember thinking she was the most organized and perfect girlfriend anyone could ask for. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning about 2 years ago. I remember it was Tuesday because I always have a team meeting on Tuesdays at 9 in the morning, and I hate Tuesdays for that specific reason. Victoria had slept at my apartment that night, like she did about 3 or 4 times a week by then, and she woke up before me around 6:30. She gave me a kiss on the forehead, told me she loved me, and that she'd see me in the evening for dinner, and left for her apartment to change before going to work. All super normal, super routine, absolutely nothing indicating my life was about to explode into 1,000 pieces. That afternoon, around 3, I sent her a message asking what she wanted for dinner and if I could stop by the supermarket to buy ingredients to make pasta, which was one of our favorite dishes to make, together. The message was never marked as read. I sent her another at 5 and another at 7, and by 9 I was frankly worried because Victoria always responded to her messages. She was obsessive with her phone. I called her like 10 times and they all went straight to voicemail. I called Megan, her best friend, and she told me she hadn't heard from Victoria all day, which was weird because they normally sent each other messages constantly during the day. I started thinking maybe something had happened to her, like an accident or something, and I was about to call hospitals when I decided to check our joint savings account because I don't know, I felt this horrible gut feeling that told me something was very wrong. I logged into the bank app on my phone, entered my password with trembling hands, not really knowing why I was so nervous, and when I saw the balance I almost threw up right there. The account had $247. $247. We had accumulated like $17,000 in that account over the last 14 months or so, and now there was basically nothing left. I checked the transaction history and saw 3 massive withdrawals made that same morning. One for $6,000, another for $5,000, $500, and another for $5,000, all authorized with Victoria's debit card between 7 and 8 in the morning, right after she had left my apartment. I felt like someone had hit me in the stomach with a baseball bat. I literally couldn't breathe properly. I called the bank immediately, but they told me they couldn't do anything, because we both had full access to the account and the withdrawals had been correctly authorized with her card and her PIN. So technically it wasn't fraud or anything illegal. But they told me I would have to resolve this directly with her or take legal action if I considered it theft. But from the banking perspective, everything was in order. I spent that whole night without sleeping, calling Victoria every hour, sending messages, trying to find some logical explanation that wasn't the obvious one, but nothing made sense. The next day, I called her work, and they told me Victoria had requested an indefinite leave for personal reasons and that it had been approved, effective immediately from that Tuesday. An indefinite leave. She hadn't told me anything about that. I went to her apartment and knocked on the door like crazy for half an hour, but nobody answered. And the downstairs neighbor told me he had seen her leave Tuesday morning with 2 large suitcases and that she had told him she was going to be away for a while. At that point, I was in total panic mode, thinking something terrible had happened to her, or that she was in trouble, or that I had done something to make her want to run away from me. But none of those theories explained why she had emptied our savings account. It was Megan who finally gave me the first real clue about what was happening, although she had no idea of the magnitude of the situation, yet. She called me like 3 days after Victoria had disappeared and asked me if I knew anything about her because she had stopped responding to her messages too. And when I told her she had disappeared with all our money, Megan was silent for a very long moment and then said something that still makes me angry when I think about it. Nathan, I need to ask you something and please be honest with me. Did Victoria ever mention anything about Connor lately? Connor. The damn ex-boyfriend from hell. I told her no, that Victoria hadn't mentioned Connor in months, maybe for half a year or more, and Megan sighed and told me she needed to see me in person because there was something she had to tell me. We met at a coffee shop the next day, and Megan looked terrible, like she hadn't slept well in days. And she told me she felt horribly guilty about something she had been doing, but hadn't thought was a problem until now. Turns out, Victoria had asked Megan like 6 months ago, right when Victoria and I were planning to open the joint savings account, to help her keep tabs on Connor on social media. Victoria had told Megan that she just wanted to make sure Connor was okay and that he had gotten over their relationship, that it was just innocent curiosity and that she didn't want to do it herself because she had blocked Connor everywhere. Megan, being the good friend she was, had agreed, and every week would send screenshots to Victoria of Connor's posts on Instagram and Facebook. At first it was every week, then it became every 2 days, and eventually Victoria was asking her for daily updates on every single thing Connor posted, every story, every comment, every like. Megan showed me the messages between her and Victoria on her phone, and it was sickening the level of obsession Victoria had with Connor. Victoria would ask her super specific things like, "Did you see who liked his last photo? Do you recognize that girl who commented on his post? Do you think he's dating someone?" And Megan, who thought she was just helping her friend close that chapter of her life, would respond with all the information she could find. But here comes the part that completely destroyed me. About 2 months ago, Connor had posted a story on Instagram from the airport with text that said something like, "Adventures coming soon," or some stupid thing like that, and Victoria had asked Megan if she could find out where he was going. Megan had seen that Connor had tagged the location as his hometown in another post and had assumed he was just going to visit his family. But when she told Victoria that, she had responded with a, "Thanks. You're the best," followed by heart emojis. Megan told me that after that conversation, Victoria had been super distant with her, responding to messages very briefly and canceling plans to see each other, and that now everything made sense in a horrible way. I asked Megan to send me all the screenshots she had of conversations with Victoria, and I spent that entire night reviewing them, trying to find more clues. There was a conversation from like 8 months ago where Victoria had asked Megan if she thought someone could fall in love with 2 people at the same time, and another from 6 months ago where Victoria casually mentioned that sometimes she missed the intensity of her relationship with Connor, but that she knew Nathan was better for her in the long run. In the long run, like I was a bank investment or something, instead of her boyfriend, who loved her. I decided to hire a private investigator, which I know sounds super dramatic, and you've probably watched too many detective series, but honestly, I didn't know what else to do, and I needed answers. I gave him all the information I had. Victoria's full name, her date of birth, the withdrawals from the bank account, everything. The investigator charged me $800 up front and told me he'd have information for me in a week maximum. He called me 3 days later. Victoria was in the Maldives. In the Maldives, that super luxurious and expensive place in the middle of the Indian Ocean where celebrities and rich people go to take photos for Instagram. The investigator had traced one of the large transactions to a 5-star resort called something like Paradise Island Resort or some super generic name like that. And when he called pretending to be a concerned family member, the hotel confirmed they had a reservation under Victoria's name for 2 people for 3 weeks, with check-in date exactly the Tuesday she disappeared. 2 people. I asked the investigator to find out who the other person was, although I already knew the answer before he told me. Connor Walker. The resort had the reservation registered under the name MS, Victoria Thompson and Mr. Connor Walker, and they had paid for the complete luxury package that included overwater bungalows, unlimited spa, diving excursions, romantic beach dinners, and all kinds of stupid things that surely cost a fortune. The investigator sent me photos he had found on Connor's social media, because it turns out the idiot hadn't had the intelligence to make his accounts private, and there they were. Victoria and Connor on the beach, Victoria and Connor toasting with champagne glasses, Victoria and Connor kissing in front of a perfect sunset. She used my money, our money, that we had saved together supposedly for our trip to Europe, to go on a luxury vacation with her ex-boyfriend to literally the other side of the world. At that moment, I felt so many emotions at the same time that I couldn't even process them correctly. Like I was furious and devastated and confused and humiliated all together, and the only thing I was thinking was that I had been the biggest idiot on the planet for 2 whole years. Obviously, all those stories about Connor being the terrible boyfriend had been lies, or at least massive exaggerations, and I had basically been a placeholder, a human ATM, that she had used while trying to get her ex back. The joint savings account hadn't been for our future together. It had been her fun to win Connor back with a big romantic gesture of dream tropical vacation. And I had fallen for every lie, every manipulation, every fake "I love you" for 2 years. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because if Victoria thought she was going to be able to do this and get away with it without consequences, she was very, very wrong. I'm a programmer. I work with systems and logic all day. And when I get really angry, I don't get violent or dramatic, I get methodical. I made a list of absolutely everything Victoria had access to of mine, or that was in her name, using my information, or my money. The Netflix account I paid for but was in both our names. I deleted her profile and changed the password. The Spotify Premium Family account where she was included. I removed her from the plan. The Amazon Prime we shared. I changed the password and billing information. My HBO Max, Disney Plus accounts, and all the other streaming subscriptions I paid for and she used. All passwords changed. All her information deleted. But that was just the warm-up. Victoria had used my address on some of her official documents when she had moved like a year and a half ago because her new lease hadn't started yet and she needed a temporary address for her renewed driver's license and some other things. I called all those institutions and updated the information so my address would no longer appear. I canceled the supplementary credit card I had given her from my account. The one we had agreed was only for emergencies, but that she used basically for everything because I, like an idiot, had said I didn't mind. When I canceled it, I realized there were like $3,500 in pending charges, all made in the days before she disappeared. New clothes, shoes, expensive beauty products, and several purchases at airport stores. I called the bank and explained the situation. And although they couldn't cancel the charges because technically they had been authorized, at least they blocked the card so she couldn't use it anymore. Here's the best part. I remembered that Victoria had asked me like 6 months ago to be a co-signer on her main credit card because she wanted to increase her credit limit and the bank required someone with better credit history than hers to sign. I, being the perfect and trusting boyfriend, had signed without thinking twice that credit card had my name as secondary responsible party, which meant I had full access to the account. I logged into the online portal and saw that Victoria had been using that card massively in the Maldives. Resort charges, excursions, fancy restaurants, gift shops, spa treatments, absolutely everything. The current balance was over $12,000 and kept going up. As co-signer, I had the authority to make changes to the account, so I called the credit bank, explained I was no longer in a relationship with the account holder and that I wanted to remove my name as co-signer. They told me I could do that, but any pending balance would continue to be the responsibility of both of us until it was paid. I asked the bank representative what would happen if I withdrew all the funds from the joint savings account that still had the remaining $247 and closed the account. And he told me I could do that because we both had full access. So, that's what I did. I withdrew every last cent and closed the account. Then, and this was probably the most satisfying part, I called the Paradise Island Resort in the Maldives. It cost me like $30 just in international phone charges, but it was worth every cent. I explained to the resort manager that my name was associated with payment methods that were being used fraudulently at their property, and that I wanted to make sure nothing else was charged to me. The manager was super professional and transferred me to the billing department, where I explained the whole situation. I gave them the credit card numbers where I was the holder or co-signer and formally requested that those cards be blocked and removed as valid payment methods for that reservation. The billing representative told me he understood the situation, but that they would need the guests to provide an alternative valid payment method to cover pending charges and any future expenses, or else they wouldn't be able to allow them to check out until the balance was resolved. I asked him how much the pending balance was at that moment, and he told me he couldn't give me that specific information for privacy reasons, but that it was substantial. Perfect. I thanked him and hung up, and I imagined Victoria's face when she tried to pay for something with the credit card and they told her it was blocked. I imagined the conversation she would have to have with Connor when they realized they were basically trapped in the Maldives until they found another way to pay for all those luxury expenses. I didn't have to wait long to find out what happened next, because Megan called me like 2 weeks later, completely hysterical, saying Victoria had finally contacted her asking for emergency money. Victoria had sent Megan a long and dramatic message explaining there was a terrible misunderstanding with her credit cards and that the resort wouldn't let her leave until she paid the pending balance, which was over $15,000 at that point. She had told Megan she only needed a loan of $5,000 to resolve part of the problem and be able to negotiate a payment plan for the rest, and that she would pay everything back in less than 2 months. Megan, who by that point already knew the whole story of what Victoria had done to me, told her absolutely not, that what she had done was unforgivable and that she would have to solve her own problems. Victoria was trapped in the Maldives for 67 days total. 67 days. Eventually, the resort reached an agreement with her where they retained their passports until she paid at least $8,000 of the pending balance, and she had to call her parents, who were obviously furious and embarrassed, to help her. Her parents paid the $8,000 but made it very clear they would never help her with anything again, and that they had basically disowned her for being so irresponsible and dishonest. Connor, the hero of our story, apparently managed to buy a return flight home around week 5 of being there, leaving Victoria alone at the resort with all the debt. When Victoria finally returned to the city, she tried to contact me immediately. She started sending me text messages, like 50 in one day, all saying variations of the same thing, that she was so sorry, that she had made the worst mistake of her life, that Connor had manipulated and confused her, that she really loved me, and that I was the only one for her, that she had never stopped thinking about me while there was in the Maldives, and a whole list of excuses and lies that I didn't buy for even a second. I responded with a single message: never contact me again. You no longer have access to anything of mine, and I don't want to hear from you again. She blocked me, unblocked me, sent me more messages begging that I at least talk to her in person so she could explain herself properly, and I simply didn't respond anymore. I changed my phone number 2 weeks later because she was getting obsessive, calling from unknown numbers at all hours. But Victoria couldn't just accept that everything was over and move on with her ruined life like a normal person. About 2 months after she had returned, she started posting things on her social media about how she had been in an emotionally abusive relationship and how she had finally found the courage to get out and start over. She didn't mention my name directly, but it was obvious she was talking about me because she talked about her ex-boyfriend who worked in tech and how he had been controlling with money and manipulative. Basically, she was trying to rewrite the entire story and paint herself as the victim. Some of her friends who didn't know the real story started leaving her supportive comments, saying things like, "You're so strong and you deserve so much better." And I was absolutely furious. But I decided not to respond because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing it had affected me. Then Megan, bless Megan, decided enough was enough. Megan made a super long public post on Facebook with screenshots of all her conversations with Victoria, where you could clearly see how Victoria had been obsessed with Connor during our entire relationship, how she had planned the trip to the Maldives, and how she had manipulated multiple people, including Megan herself. Megan also included screenshots of the messages Victoria had sent her from the Maldives, complaining that Connor was being distant and that things weren't like she had imagined, and basically exposed every lie Victoria had been trying to sell. The post went viral in our social circle. It was shared like 200 times, and in less than 24 hours, basically everyone knew the truth about what had happened. Victoria's life completely fell apart after that. She lost her job at the marketing company because, in 2-8, turns out when you request an indefinite leave saying it's for a family emergency, but then your coworkers see your photos on Instagram in the Maldives, your employer tends to get pretty upset about that. Her reputation in our social circle was destroyed. Most of her friends stopped talking to her, and even her own family was embarrassed by her. And here comes the cherry on top: Connor, the great love of her life for whom she had destroyed our relationship and emptied our savings, started dating Victoria's younger sister like 3 months after they returned from the Maldives. Her 1-year-old sister. Victoria sent me another message from a new number telling me about it and saying she finally understood how I had felt and that now she knew what real betrayal was, and I simply responded, "Okay," and blocked her again. The last time I heard from Victoria was like 6 months ago. She showed up at my new apartment. He had renewed the lease at my old place and moved to another building specifically so she wouldn't know where I lived, but I guess someone told her. She knocked on my door on a Sunday morning, and when I opened it thinking it was my delivery breakfast, there she was. She looked terrible, honestly, like she hadn't slept in weeks, with giant dark circles and uncombed hair. She told me she needed to talk to me urgently, that it was about money. I told her we had nothing to talk about and started closing the door, but she put her foot in to block it and begged me to listen to her for just 2 minutes. I told her she had exactly 30 seconds before I called building security. Victoria explained to me, talking super fast and almost crying, that the credit card debt where I had been co-signer was destroying her financially, that the interest had accumulated to almost $20,000, and that collection agencies were calling her constantly, and that she needed me to help her pay at least part of it, because technically, I was still responsible too as co-signer. I told her that was completely her problem, that she had generated that debt with her decisions, and that I had already made the necessary legal arrangements to remove my responsibility from that account through my lawyer. She started screaming that I was a heartless monster, that how could I be so cruel to someone I had shared 2 years of my life with, and I simply told her to look in a mirror if she wanted to see a real monster, and closed the door in her face. I heard her crying on the other side for a few minutes, and then she left. Now, I'm in a relationship with an incredible girl named Hannah, who I met at the gym like 8 months ago. Hannah is a nurse. She's 26 years old, and she's basically the polar opposite of Victoria in all the good ways you can imagine. She's honest to the point of being almost brutally direct. She's financially responsible to the extreme, and when I told her the whole Victoria story, she told me I had dodged a .50 caliber bullet. She's right. When I think about what could have happened if Victoria and I had gotten married, if we had had kids, if I had invested more years of my life with her, it gives me chills. I lost $17,000 in 2 years of my life, but I gained the clarity of knowing exactly what type of person I never want to have in my life again. Hannah and I are planning a trip to Japan next year, and we opened separate savings accounts because we both learned the hard way that it's better to keep finances independent until you're literally married. I guess in the end, Victoria did me a favor, although in the most painful and expensive way possible. Now, I know exactly what red flags to look for and how to protect myself better. And honestly, I feel happier now than I ever felt with Victoria. So, thank you, Victoria, for teaching me everything I don't want in a partner and for getting out of my life before you could do more damage than you already did.